Shoot, man. Shoot or shoot. As far as Keith Smith is concerned, I reread both notes on Keon Ellis and on Keegan Murray. And if you weren't able to listen yesterday because life be lifing, let me read you first the Keon Ellis part of it, and then I will read the Keegan Murray part of it, okay? On Keon Ellis and a possible extension. This is a Keith Smith article that he dropped and then promptly went on vacation. So shout out to Keith Smith because he deserves it. Met him at Summer League. Great guy. Can't wait to have him back on the show.
Yeah, we tried. And he was like, I dropped this story today. I am going on vacation tonight.
Nicely done from Keith of Spa Track, by the way. On Keon Ellis and a possible extension, quote, that's the goal. We had a lot of discussion on the best way to handle things with Keon and the option we had for him. Ultimately, it's a show of trust that we picked up his option instead of making him a restricted free agent. That helped us add some talent this year that we might have not been able to get otherwise. Now, we hope to get something done that keeps Keon in Sacramento because he's a really good player and different from all of our other guards, a Sacramento front office executive said. Let's start with Keon, okay? And then we will discuss Keegan Murray. So I read that yesterday, and I felt pretty good about it, right? I felt that the Kings were being pretty transparent, at least with Keith Smith. They've been transparent with us. We want as much flexibility as possible. Then I started thinking about that one specific line. And the one specific line where Keith Smith, as he is, breaking down what is said, the specific line where they mention that they were able to get more talent, right? This specific line from the executive. That helped us add some talent this year that we might not have been able to get otherwise, okay? That specifically. Now let's think about what the Kings did this offseason. This has nothing to do with draft picks because you obviously get draft picks. So Dennis Schroeder, essentially. This helped us acquire Dennis Schroeder in a specific way, this is one of the ways we were able to acquire Dennis Schroeder in a specific way, which keeps our MLE, whether they use it or not, is their prerogative, and which started the whole conversation with the 916, of course. And here we are. Now let me spin this to you, and that sounds like a positive thing. Hey, they needed a point guard. They go get a point guard. Cool. Now let me spin this to you in a different way. And I'm not trying to annoy anyone, but this is what I was thinking about last night as I reread the article. If they end up losing Keon Ellis, they want to do a deal. But if they end up losing Keon Ellis, you could pretty much say that you lost him because you wanted to give Dennis Schroeder more money when we have really no clue if anyone else was going to give Dennis Schroeder that amount of money. Think about that for a second. So if they keep Keon Ellis, no harm, no foul, right? We wanted to compete. We wanted to make sure Dennis Schroeder was a Sacramento King. But if they lose Keon Ellis, if they don't get a deal done during the season and he becomes, I believe, an unrestricted free agent, you have to, you Sacramento, you Kings fans will have to deal with the idea, and it wouldn't be wrong, that you essentially lost Keon Ellis to acquire Dennis Schroeder. Obviously, they haven't lost anybody yet, but that would be what it was. You lost, and here's the thing: they dumped money. They really wanted Dennis Schroeder, and they wanted him in a specific way. They dumped Valanciunas, and now they pick up Keon's option as well. And if you lose Keon, you have to live with you lost Keon Ellis to give Dennis Schroeder more money, not just to acquire Dennis Schroeder, but to give Dennis Schroeder $15 million a year, kind of over 3 years, of course, over 2 years, when they're, to this day, to this day, not to go Deontay Wilder on you, we do not know if the Pistons or any other team was planning on giving Dennis Schroeder $15 million a year. He made 12 last season, so it's not as if it's a completely ridiculous amount, but maybe this was a little bit of that Sacramento tax, a little bit of we really like Dennis Schroeder. For a team that is currently projected to win 34 and a half games. That's where they're set. You can find them at 36. So if you lose Keon Ellis, you would have lost him over a 34 and a half win team projected, and to pay Dennis Schroeder more money than we have no clue if anybody else was going to pay Dennis Schroeder that money. And I thought, Kyle, if they don't get something done with Keon, and again, whether they make the playoffs and lose in the first round or not. And I understand that Kings fans, myself included, value Keon maybe a little bit more than the rest does it. I don't care. That's not going to go over well.
Yeah, I think that's the answer right there, is that they're going to have a hard time justifying choosing Dennis Schroeder over Keon Ellis. Mm-hmm. Specifically to this fan base, right?
Yeah.
Because so much of the conversation this offseason has been, okay, in the long run, would they rather keep Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, or Malik Monk as the three guards? If it ends up being all three of those, but not retaining Keon Ellis, I feel like that's going to be more infuriating to people than it would be just having done the sign and trade where Malik Monk goes to Detroit and Schroeder comes to the Kings, and then they either bring in Kuminga or not bring in Kuminga. Let's say they declined the option and had an extension lined up and gave Keon a pay raise for next year.
Yeah.
If they had done that, added Dennis Schroeder and not kept Malik Monk, I don't think there would have been the same outrage from people as there would be if Keon Ellis, originally undrafted Kings, Stockton Kings, last guy on the roster, turned into rotation player. If that guy doesn't get re-signed, which is a very real possibility he won't, and maybe they are preparing as if he won't be here beyond this season. If that guy leaves, that's going to make the fan base more emotional than had they just cut their losses and moved Malik Monk now or brought in someone else.
A fringe starter in Dennis Schroeder that you have now given $15 million a year for at least the next 2 years. And it could, not that it will, but it could cost you Keon Ellis. It could. And they said it themselves in the same note. In the same note, they say, we hope to get something done that keeps Keon in Sacramento because he's a really good player and different from all of our other guards. All of our other guards, and they have 12. They have 12 guards, and the one guy that is different from all your other guards, you could lose.
Yeah.
And maybe they're not counting Dennis Schroeder in that conversation. I think they're talking non-point guards. But even still, with what Keon has shown, yes, maybe he might be a little bit overvalued in Sacramento, in the 916, in the 209, all over the Sacramento area. If you're a Kings fan, if you like to light the beam, whether you listen to radio every day, whether you listen 1 day a week, 2 days a week, everybody loves Keon. And even if, here's the kicker though, even if you don't love Keon, even if you are the realistic Kings fan that thinks, look, man, dude, Keon's good, but I think we need to pipe down. We've definitely had those calls. I try to remember names, but off the top of my head, I don't want to say the wrong person, but we have had those calls. Even that person will not be able to swallow losing Keon to give Dennis Schroeder more money. That's the problem. Losing Keon to even get a PJ Washington, right? And maybe that's still in the cards or weirdly the case, right? When, Kyle, you like to kind of follow trades down the line. Maybe that is the case. We don't know because they have the flexibility. And to the point of the 916 that I was arguing with earlier, okay, so let me get this straight. You picked up Keon's option for more flexibility.
This year.
You went and got Dennis Schroeder, cool. But now you're telling me that because you don't want the cap constraints and the luxury tax and all that, you're not going to use the MLE this season, but you might still lose Keon Ellis? That doesn't make a ton of sense.
That's the other part of this, right? Is if they knew they weren't going to get Kuminga and they knew they weren't going to sign another point guard after Schroeder, which they didn't know at the time when they picked up Keon Ellis's option, right? Because they had to pick it up, I think it was June 29th. So when they picked up the option, they were still trying to go for Schroeder and Westbrook because they did the dual Zoom calls.
Yes.
And they were trying to negotiate with the Warriors on a Kuminga situation. And the fact that they struck out on everything except Schroeder and as of right now aren't using the mid-level exception says to me if you had just prioritized Schroeder, you could have signed him with the MLE, declined Keon's team option or declined Keon's option for this year, and had an extension already lined up before that. Because I know free agency opens on June 30th. Most of these teams already have the deals lined up before free agency. There is tampering, there is agents doing stuff. You just have to be good at not getting caught, right? If you had just prioritized Schroeder, who we knew before free agency opened was highly connected to the Kings, they could have used that available trade exception space to sign Keon. And I don't want to go into the semantics of it beyond that, but essentially they could have made it work, but it would have looked different, and maybe they wouldn't have given Schroeder $15 million a year for two years with a third non-guaranteed year.
Yeah, and again, look, if it comes up, we can't control how they value certain players. And I do trust, obviously, the basketball IQ of Scott Perry, BJ Armstrong in the front office. But if it comes out that Detroit was offering Dennis Schroeder 14 a year, and the Kings said, we really feel like he's our guy. There are some people that might disagree with that, but we really feel like Dennis Schroeder is our guy. Okay. I don't have to agree with it the same way somebody doesn't have to agree with any moves that the Kings make or how I kind of break down those moves and my opinions on it, but it would make more sense. We don't, and maybe we could just assume that, but right now we don't know.
Well, and also from a pure basketball standpoint, like you mentioned, Keon Ellis is a fringe starter. He probably won't start on this team as presently constructed. He might play some closing minutes, but again, he's probably not going to start on this team as presently constructed. So Keon Ellis himself is a fringe starter in the NBA, just like Dennis Schroeder.
Right.
There is a basketball argument for the 2026 team that signing Dennis Schroeder to that extension is a good allocation of money because he plays a position of need as a fringe starter. Now, is it going to get you 48 wins? No, it's not. But in a vacuum, they needed a point guard. They got a point guard at a relatively affordable price who has been a starter in the league for 9 years, right? Yeah. But even if Schroeder and Keon are bringing similar values, like we talked about before, it's not going to go over well with the fan base if you bring in Schroeder and don't extend Keon Ellis, because Keon Ellis is the type of player every fan base wants. The undrafted guy through the G League, last guy on the bench to backup to starter, like that is the prototypical story.
Yeah, fans love stories
that everyone gets excited about,
yes.
and you want people to be excited about that.
Yeah, it's a real thing. And they should, because you love homegrown players. We all do. And obviously nothing has happened yet as it pertains to an extension or losing Keon in free agency. But as I read Keith Smith's article, or I guess I should say reread it, because the first time I read it, we were on the air. But as I reread it, I thought, this could end up really bad if the Kings. Now, I think here is the kicker, and this goes back to how I think things will go. If they are on track for 34 wins, we will see some big moves made at the trade deadline. Even if that's if that's a DeMar DeRozan, if that's the time where you do DeMar DeRozan for Terry Rozier and the 2 seconds to just clear that if Terry Rozier is able to play basketball.
Even if he isn't, you can still do it.
Even if he isn't.
It's just the money.
You'd actually prefer him not to. But you could do that deal. We're saying, Uncle, it's not happening. We're sellers. DeMar is gone. We'll see what happens in the summer for Sabonis. Now we have more money to throw at Keon as well.
Maybe Malik gets traded.
So that is maybe what Scott Perry is banking on. Hey, there's really no world. Either we're going to – I guess the only world that could be viewed as negative and you would still have a positive within it is the Kings exceed expectations. They get to the first round. So now everybody feels better about it. Obviously, you can't blow that up, and you end up losing Keon because nobody goes anywhere because you went to the playoffs. So you sacrifice Keon for a playoff run. Maybe that's how Scott Perry is looking at this. We're either not going to play well and we're going to blow it up at the trade deadline or in the summer, and we're going to have a lot of money to throw at Keon, and that's maybe what we've unofficially told him, or we're going to exceed expectations and Thanos at what cost? The cost is going to be Keon. Those are the two worlds that Scott Perry is living in.
Well, and in the Keon case, like if I were his agent, and I'm sure I would not be qualified to be his agent, but just reading the landscape, there's no reason, unless the Kings are offering a deal you feel like you can't refuse. You're an unrestricted free agent in a summer where a bunch of teams are going to have cap space or the ability to make sign-in trades. You shouldn't talk about an extension until like May. So that way what everyone's cap situation looks like, everyone's roster, and theoretically the Kings offer this summer should still be on the table next summer unless there's an injury or something bad happens. Like, I guess you could say guarantee your money now if they're offering you $20 million a year or $17 million a year. Maybe you just want to guarantee your money. But other than that, you wait to become an unrestricted free agent because theoretically multiple teams will be bidding for your services.
This isn't really disputing what you're saying, but there are a lot of big names that are going to be thrown around in the 2026 offseason between the draft, that crazy 2026 draft, and the 2026 offseason. This is a little copium here, but you could maybe feel as if Keon isn't going to be at the forefront of all those conversations. And maybe that's why the Kings feel as if, hey, look at all the free agents that are going to be out there. I don't know how many of them we are going to prioritize. Nobody else is going to prioritize Keon, even in an unrestricted free agency, the same way that we are. So if we are, and maybe we're accepting, again, based on the fact that we're probably going to be moving off of one of these bigger contracts, that we're going to possibly overpay Keon a little bit as a, hey, thank you for your service. Thank you for what you've done, a la a Brock Purdy. He's not the same as Brock Purdy, but a la a Brock Purdy. We want to keep you. We're just also trying to compete right now. For what reason? We know the reason, but because we have to try to compete right now.
Right. And maybe say they offer 4 years and $72 million, which is $18 million a year. Maybe Keon says, hey, maybe I'm going to get up to $20 million in the summer, but I'm just content just taking it, guarantee my money. If I get hurt, I'm locked up long term. I've got multi-generational wealth, which I know we talk about this with the NBA guys, but Keon Ellis's career earnings are like $4 million or like $4.5 million. Like, it's not the multi-generational wealth.
No, you could trick that off easy. I'm not saying Keon would. Somebody could.
No, you're not going to last your entire life on that kind of money. But I mean, I'm saying you'd have to invest it, blah, blah, blah. To your point, it's easier to trick off $4 million than it is to trick off $74 million.
Yes, which both things can be done. And here's the other part of this, which is why I'm having this conversation. But this kind of goes back to how I initially felt yesterday, because you have to think that the Kings have already done a little bit of that homework on the 2026 free agent class, and they feel confident that they will be able to re-sign Keon. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen, but if they thought, I don't think them accepting the offer or picking up the option, it was them saying, yeah, we're okay saying goodbye to Keon. I think it's a calculated risk that might come to bite them in the butt. But I think the other part of being bit in the butt is if you possibly lose Keon and you didn't even use the MLE and you ended up with 35 wins. That's the other problem, because to the 916's point, you wanted to save a bit of cash and the cap flexibility for the future. And it's more of double dutch, right? You're double dutching. When do you hop in? Are you in or out? You can't keep messing around. You try to jump in and you jump out. Are you going for it this season or not? Because if you weren't going for it this season, you should have just paid Keon. If you are going for it, then use the MLE, even if it might hamstring you in the future, because clearly if you were prioritizing your future, you would have made sure that you locked up Keon. So maybe they're just in a position right now where they don't feel like they can do one thing or the other. All right, when we return, Keegan Murray has some notes in the Keith Smith article as well. So we talk about how there is another side to Keegan Murray's conversation. Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports.
There's a lot of